Hello, everybody. Welcome. It's so good to see you today. I'm Jenny Kopak. I'm the CEO of Science Olympiad, and I want to welcome you to our Weather Workshop Wednesday with Iisha Scott of NBC Chicago. She is an award-winning meteorologist, and we're just about to get started. We're so glad that you guys took some time out of your day, and for all the people who are watching afterwards, thank you so much for all you do for Science Olympiad and for your interest. So we've got friends from all corners of the United States here today. I checked out the registration list. We've got people from Illinois and Texas, New Jersey, California, Wisconsin, Missouri, just to name a few. So thank you guys so much for being here and for welcoming Iisha. So just to get you guys situated today, we're going to hear from our guest. We're going to run through some slides, and then we're going to get to some audience questions, which will be moderated by my colleague, Katrina Pavlik. So if you have a question, some of you have already pre-submitted those questions. You can put them in the chat and we'll see those. We'll queue those up and get those ready at the end of the session. This will be recorded and then posted on YouTube tomorrow. We have the Science Olympiad YouTube page, which is linked right off of our homepage at soinc.org. You can find it there tomorrow. Make sure you watch it and share with friends. Also, for all the registrants today, we'll be picking 2 lucky winners for an awesome weather-themed swag bag with water bottles and stickers and a weather field guide and some cool stuff from our friends at NBC Chicago. I love those guys. Okay, so here we go. Let's get to it. I'm so happy to be able to introduce my friend and fellow Chicagoan, Iisha Scott, to today's Weather Workshop Wednesday session, which is also part of our Green Generation Month for MySO. Science Olympiad has had a meteorology event for really as long as I can remember, and it's always one of our most popular events. Who doesn't love learning and talking about the weather? So here's also a pro tip to all you Chicago or Science Olympiad coaches out there. Your local weather professional is a great person to know. So not only here in Chicago, but in your city, reach out to a TV weathercaster. They'll do live remotes from Science Olympiad tournaments. They'll run your meteorology event. And for many of them, they'll come to your elementary Science Olympiad fun night and present the Weather or Not event, which is a fantastic way to really get connected to your local TV station. The weather people are great because they're naturally curious, they're great communicators, and they love sharing their knowledge. So we're so lucky to be able to spend some time with Iisha Scott today, and during Earth Week, no less. Iisha's background is truly amazing. She has degrees in mass communications, geosciences, and broadcast meteorology. And she earned a certified broadcast meteorologist seal from the American Meteorological Society. Before coming to Chicago, Iisha was most recently with WCNC in Charlotte, North Carolina, and has won several broadcasting awards for coverage of severe storms across the South. She's also committed to community service and helping young students find pathways to STEM careers. So let's hear from Iisha now. Welcome to Science Olympiad.
Thank you so much, Jenny. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to be here. My passion for weather, but also spreading my passion for weather to you all. And I hope it becomes contagious and you find yourself just obsessed with weather, just as I was. So I want to share some slides with you so that we can kind of talk about, how I kind of got into weather and what are some of those things that I most, kind of sparked my interest in weather. So we'll start from the beginning. We'll go through some slides, we'll answer some questions, and we'll have a good time. So I want to talk about my journey to weather. So my journey to weather, if you ask my mother, I don't actually remember this. So I always say, if you ask my mother, it started with a snowflake. So when I was maybe 2 or 3 years old, I had a snowflake fall in my hand. I closed my hand and I opened my hand back up, and I was looking around and in my hand, and I was like, oh my gosh, where did the snowflake go? Because I thought it would be in my hand. But if you ask me, my journey in weather started when I was 7 years old. But looking back, I noticed it started when I was 2 or 3. But by 7 years old, I told myself I wanted to be a meteorologist. I told my parents this is what I wanted to do. I grew up in Virginia. Now in Virginia, we experience hurricanes, we experience thunderstorms. And so the hurricanes and thunderstorms always made me really curious. So I would think to myself, how do these thunderstorms form, and what makes hurricanes so strong and so powerful? So what I decided to do was, I knew I wanted to be a meteorologist, but I wasn't quite sure what route I needed to take to get there. So I went on to high school. Obviously, you need to go to high school. And during my high school years, I knew that I had also sparked this interest in earth science. So I loved learning about clouds and a little bit of everything with earth science. But then I went on to college and I got a degree, a Bachelor of Science degree in mass communications and broadcasting from Norfolk State. And then after Norfolk State, I said, okay, I have the broadcasting degree. Now I need the weather skills. I need to know how to put these two things together so that I could be a broadcast meteorologist. Because for me, I knew growing up, I was watching the Weather Channel every Saturday morning. And so I knew I wanted to be a meteorologist on television. And that's what's called a broadcast meteorologist. So I went on and got a second Bachelor of Science degree from Mississippi State University. And I majored in geosciences and broadcast meteorology. So I want to talk to you about what is it like being a meteorologist. What I love about it is every day is completely different. So we're in Chicago, and in Chicago, the weather is never the same. I'll give you, I know I don't want to get too deep into the timing, but just as an example, we're going to have a little bit of everything in the forecast this week. So we had winter early this week, and then we're going to have spring this weekend. So we had snow not too long ago, and we're going to have 80-degree temperatures just this upcoming weekend. So maybe about 5 or 6 days after that. So weather really is completely different every day. You do know what you're going to get, but covering what you're going to get is so different. Communication is key when it comes to being a broadcast meteorologist. And I say that because you have to know how to communicate something as difficult as meteorology with your viewers, your everyday viewers, right? So when I first started as a broadcast meteorologist, I was always told, don't use the big science terms, because in school, we're learning about the upper level jet. And you're probably like, what is that? I have no idea what that is. Or we're learning about the jet stream. These are words you don't hear, when you just watch your forecast, maybe with your parents during the evening hours. So when you watch your forecast on TV, or even in the morning when you're getting ready for school, these aren't words that you typically hear. So every day I do have to break down a very complicated science into a way that people will understand it. Severe weather means long days and sometimes really long nights. So any severe thunderstorms, tornadoes, I usually expect to be at work for a pretty long time. Looking back over my career, we would call those days 12 on, 12 off. So whenever I would cover hurricanes, we would work for 12 hours and then we're off for 12 hours and then we're back for 12 hours. So kind of the same when you have tornado warnings, we have to stay on TV during those tornado warnings or those severe weather outbreaks. We can't technically get off of television. So it makes for some really long days. Peer support and mentorship is a must. And the reason being is because meteorology, especially broadcast meteorology, can be a tough field. Just like so many other fields, it can be really tough. So it's best to have support, not only support from your colleagues and other meteorologists, but also mentors, people who can kind of keep you going and give you encouragement when you need it, especially on some of those long days when you're working 12-hour shifts. So some common questions that I get as a meteorologist, and I kind of just took these 4 because these are some of the ones I hear most often. How do tornadoes form? What is the difference between hail and sleet? What is the difference between weather and climate? And how do hurricanes form? So I want to go through each one for you. All right, so we're going to start with how do tornadoes form? Now, I don't want to get too complicated. Again, remember, part of my job is to break down this very complicated science so that people can understand. So tornadoes form from what's called wind shear. All right. So wind shear is a change in wind direction or speed with height. So we're going from the surface, so the ground where we are, all the way up in the atmosphere. So we need the air to change as we go up in the atmosphere. So basically what happens, in sort of simple terms, what happens is when you have a tornado or a thunderstorms, the winds are going up. So you can see the picture that I put up here, and I thought the picture would be a really good illustration versus me just trying to explain it. So when you have wind pulled up into a thunderstorm, that's called an updraft. So wind is always being pulled up into the storm. And then you have air that is basically rotating on the ground. And once that air is pulled up into the thunderstorm, then you get air that is rotating up and down. So no longer just on the ground. And that's how you get tornadoes, sort of the beginning stages of a tornado forming. I know it's a little complicated, but I want to keep it as simple as possible. So what is the difference between hail and sleet? Okay, so this one I thought was really interesting because I also wanted to bring in a new kind of weather word that you may have never heard of before. Maybe you have and didn't really know what it was. So I want to introduce you to grapple, or maybe just reintroduce you to grapple. So grapple is actually snowflakes that have been collected on this sort of almost like a hail or little ice pellet. It's snowflakes, but it's almost slushy like. So it's not quite as hard as hail or sleet. It's almost in between hail and a snowflake. It looks like ice, but it's really soft. It's almost like a soft ice pellet. Hail, though, is a frozen raindrop that comes from thunderstorms, and sleet is actually liquid precip that freezes before it actually makes its way down to the ground. So sleet we typically see with winter storms. Hail we mainly only see with thunderstorms, and then grapple, we usually see grapple in the winter time. But remember, grapple, if you think of it this way, it's kind of like a ice pellet or hail or sleet mixed with a snowflake. So really in this case, it would be a sleet mixed with a snowflake. It's really soft, kind of crunchy. Okay, so what is the difference between weather and climate? So I thought this graphic was great. This is from the National Center for Environmental Information. This is from NOAA, but I thought this was great. And here's why, because weather tells you what to wear each day. Right. So when you think about weather, I may need my rain jacket, or I may need my coat, right? Or my boots, as you see here, or my sunglasses because the sun is out. However, climate tells you what type of clothes that you actually have in your closet. So say, for instance, if in my closet, I look at my closet and I have mostly coats, or I have mostly sweaters, right? Especially in the Midwest. I may have a few shorts and sandals, but the bulk of the clothing items in my closet is mostly geared towards winter or cooler temperatures. That tells you your climate. So weather is what is happening from day to day, but climate is what has happened over a course of a few decades. Typically, it's over a course of 30 years, what that actually looks like. So whether it's day-to-day, climate is the longer term, what we've seen overall. And I really thought this was a great way to break down weather and climate. So when you're trying to figure out, do I need the umbrella today? Do I need the boots today? That's weather. But when you think about what's the general climate of an area, look at your closet and see what you mostly have, or what maybe you mostly have coats, or you mostly have sweaters. That will give you an idea of what the climate is. And remember, the climate is what we've seen on average over the past 30 years. That's the technical definition. Okay, how do thunderstorms and hurricanes kind of are interchangeably, in a sense, not quite, but in a sense. And I'll show you what I mean in just a second. How do hurricanes form? So there are about 4 or 5 things that a hurricane needs to form. I know, and we're based in Chicago. We don't really deal with hurricanes here, but most of my career I have covered and chased hurricanes. We'll say, quote unquote, chased hurricanes. So what does a hurricane need? So first and foremost, a hurricane needs warm ocean water, more than 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So this water actually provides energy for the hurricanes. It causes evaporation, which it makes for humid air. Also those clouds, you have to have clouds to have a hurricane. Also, you need winds coming together to force the air to go upward, right? Because that actually helps too with the formation of those clouds. Third, you need winds that flow outward above the storm, allowing that air below to rise. Fourth, you need humid air rising that also makes the clouds of the storm. And then 5, you need light winds outside of the hurricane, because what that does, the light winds will help to steer it, but it also allows it to grow. So if winds are too strong outside or around a hurricane, then that tends to rip that hurricane apart. It's what we call shear. So if you're thinking about meteorology, maybe as a career or even broadcast meteorology, there are a couple of organizations that I'm personally a part of that I absolutely love and that have really helped me in my career. So those organizations are the American Meteorological Society, the National Weather Association, and the National Association of Black Journalists. And you may be thinking, well, why the National Association of Black Journalists? Is it geared more so towards journalists? It started out that way, but we actually, and I'm a part of this organization, we actually just started a weather and climate kind of subgroup, if you will, to the National Association of Black Journalists. So we just started that weather and climate group, and we're super excited, and we're getting more folks to join us, and we're putting out some good content as well. So these are kind of your few organizations that I can think of that I'm a part of that really helped me along my career journey as a broadcast meteorologist. Any questions? I know we kind of covered a lot there, but any questions?
Yeah, so Iisha, thank you so much. That was so great. I certainly learned a lot. And actually one of our attendees said that they had been in a tornado, which sounds really scary. So thank you for explaining how those form. One of the questions that came that was pre-submitted, and if you could address it, that would be great, especially as we are looking at climate change and this, we're celebrating Earth Week, has the warming planet affected the incidence of severe weather events like drought and hurricanes, and what about tornadoes?
Yes. So when it comes to climate change, global warming, which fuels climate change, because global warming is the rate at which our planet is warming. And when we think about climate change, how is the climate changing in result to our warming planet? It has certainly had an impact on our weather. Severe weather, we've seen severe weather in places maybe that we haven't seen it before. Or if you think back, you know, it's funny because someone explained it to me this way. If you think back to, you know, maybe decades ago, I know we have kids or younger people, so they're probably like, wait, decades. But if you think back just a while ago, and you may say to yourself, gosh, I don't remember ever hearing about tornadoes in that region. Or for instance, one thing that comes to mind, Alaska had like their first 80-degree temperature. I think it was 2 years ago. This wasn't things that were happening before. And so we are seeing climate change really create stronger storms, and those stronger storms also mean that we're seeing more severe weather too. When we think about severe weather, we also have to think about the humidity, because that typically is a big driver with severe weather, is how much moisture do we have in the air. So we're also seeing, as a result of climate change, more heat in the atmosphere is also making for stronger, more intense storms. And also hurricanes, you know, they're also driving hurricanes to become more stronger and more intense. That's a really good question.
Interesting. Great. Another question that came in was, did you ever consider doing anything else in meteorology? And if you weren't a broadcast meteorologist, what would you be?
I love that question, because this is all I've ever wanted to do. Literally all I've ever wanted to do. But I will say, the more I've researched and kind of put my feet into the climate world, it's becoming so interesting to me. And so I think if I had to do something else, I would want to do something in the climate realm. I don't know exactly what that would look like, but I'm so passionate just about, you know, not only our planet, but also weather. And I'm a problem solver by nature. So I'm like, what can we do to fix this? You know, how can we fix what's going on? So I think I would do something in the climate change arena.
Right. Interesting. And what's the worst weather that you've ever been in during a broadcast?
So the worst weather, we had a tornado outbreak. This was in Virginia. There was, I think the tornado was a category 3 in Virginia, and it had completely decimated everything. The only thing that I remember that was standing was a washing machine. And actually, from that tornado, unfortunately, there were 2 people who died from that tornado, and they sent me out the next day to cover it. And I had never seen anything like that in my life. And we hear about tornadoes and we hear about the damage that tornadoes can do. But I think until you see it for yourself, kind of up close and personal, you know, but you don't really know. And when I saw the damage that that tornado did, I thought to myself, oh my gosh, this is really bad. You know, you hear about it, but until you see it, you just don't really understand the scope of just how bad it is. So I think that was the hardest for me.
That sounds really powerful.
Yeah.
Another question that came in was, how hard is it to get a job like you have? And what are if somebody's interested in getting a broadcast meteorologist job, what steps should they be thinking about taking either during college or after college?
That's a really good question. So for me, it was not that difficult to get into broadcast meteorology. I think the hardest part is that first job because you don't have any experience. So someone's literally betting on you. They're like, okay, we're giving you this chance. Let's see what you do with it. For me, it was difficult with that first job, but I had a really great mentor, Nancy Kent Smith. I will never forget her because she got me my first job in Richmond, Virginia. She vouched for me. She knew how hard I was working, and she helped me get my first job in TV, which was in Wilmington, North Carolina. So if someone's interested in becoming a broadcast meteorologist, I would say a couple of things. One, make sure that you're getting as much science and math as you can while you're in, whether it's middle school or especially high school, that you're really getting those science and math classes under your belt. Because weather is a really hard degree. It is really hard. And even now, you know, some of the questions I'm thinking to myself, okay, how can I break this down so that it's understandable? Because it's a really tough degree. Just as an example, I had to take calculus 1, calculus 2, calculus 3, and differential equations. And no shame in my game, I took calculus 1 3 times before I passed it. So it was a really hard degree. Science, I was great at. I loved it. Earth science, all of that. I was great at it. But math, I was not great at all. I had tutors. I mean, just all of it. I had tutors with me, I feel like left and right. But I passed those classes. And that's, you know, if you're interested in broadcast meteorology, really getting those math and science classes under your belt so that when you do get to college, it will make it a little bit easier to get through some of those really difficult times in those classes. Because just thinking about physics 1 and physics 2, oh my gosh, it was a lot.
I love hearing those stories though of not failure, but having to try something again. I mean, it really, the fact that you know, the power of that word yet, I haven't figured it out yet, means that you can still get there, and clearly you did. So thank you for sharing that. Are there any internships in broadcast meteorology, and should students also be looking for those kinds of opportunities at their local news stations?
They should. There are a lot of internships. I interned at a local station. I'm from Virginia, so I interned at a local station in Virginia. And I also got a part-time job just working behind the scenes because they knew me from interning. So they were like, Iisha, we know you want to do this. So do you want to work part-time doing some stuff behind the scenes? And of course I said, yeah. So there are internships, shadowing opportunities. That's another thing that I think we don't think about is you can just send an email and say, hey, I'm interested in this. Are there any opportunities to shadow you? I did that a couple of times and they were, the meteorologists, the local meteorologists, they were great. They said, yeah. And I came in and shadowed for a month or two over the summer. And then I went to my next thing. So it was, but I learned a lot in those shadowing opportunities and especially those internships.
Great. One of the questions was, what is the hardest part of being a meteorologist?
The hardest part for me, let's see. Okay, just a moment of transparency. I am a super perfectionist. I don't like when things don't go my way. You don't want to have that attitude, okay? You don't want to have that attitude, but I don't like if I forecast something and it does not go the way that I'm forecasting. I take it really personally. Other meteorologists, I don't know, maybe they just kind of brush it off and keep it moving, but I take it so personally because I know how much weather impacts people's lives. I plan my day around what's going to happen. If it's going to rain and if the rain is supposed to start after 12 o'clock, I keep that in mind because I plan on doing all of my outdoor stuff in the morning. But if it starts raining at 10 a.m. and I said it's going to rain after 12, I really take that personally. And I will think about it for days. And, my husband, he'll say, Iisha, oh my gosh, it was 2 hours. And I'm like, I know, but someone could have been planning on, on those 2 hours. So I think that's my biggest downfall as a meteorologist is I want to get it right. And we get it right a lot of the time, most of the time we get it right, but there are those times when we don't get it right. And I just take that really personally. Like I will think about that one time I didn't get the forecast right in March and it's like December and I'm still thinking about it. So I take it really personally. So I think for me, that's my biggest that's one thing I don't like and one of my biggest downfalls, I think.
Does anybody tweet at you if you got it wrong and they're like, I planned a picnic?
That used to happen early in my career. That really used to happen. And maybe that's why I'm the way I am now, because that used to happen. I have not gotten that though since being in Chicago.
Oh, that's good. We're nice here in the Midwest. Right. So another question that came through was, do you prefer to work out in the field or in the broadcast center? And how much, how do those two places balance out on a typical day?
Honestly, I like being in the field. And I know, some people may think it's cold, it's rainy. Why do you like being in the field? But for me, I don't like when things are routines. I don't like doing the same thing every single day. So I like it when I can go outside and talk about how cold it is. I don't know, maybe at home you're watching and you're like, why did they have this girl outside? But I like being outdoors. I like talking to people, and talking to them about the snow and, Lake Michigan. I've learned so much just about Lake Michigan, being outside, talking to people. So I do like being in the field, especially when it comes to covering severe weather. I think back to that tornado that I covered in Virginia. And for me, we hear a lot about tornadoes and the damage, and we see videos and pictures and all of that. But until you see it for yourself, it is a totally different experience. So I feel like being in the field, it widens my perspective versus just being on TV telling you what's happening and, what may happen. But if I can actually really feel that and be out in it, it helps me to tell a better weather story, I think.
I think the skill of being a broadcast meteorologist is so unique because you need to be a good presenter on a camera and a good speaker, but then you also need to understand the science behind what you're saying. So can you've already talked a little bit about the science and the math that you had to learn in school to become a broadcast meteorologist. What do you have to learn in the communications part of your work? What were those college classes like? What were some of the skills that you had to practice?
So for me, because I knew I wanted to be a broadcast meteorologist, my thinking was, and looking back, I didn't have to do it this way, but my thinking was I would get my degree in TV and communications, and then I would get a degree in meteorology, and I would combine those two. You don't have to do that. I did it that way. Looking back, I probably would not have, because I was in school for a longer amount of time. But it's so important to understand the way you communicate, because here's the deal. You can know all of the science. You can, solve these problems, math problems in these physics classes and calculus classes all day long. But if you can't communicate and tell people how you solve these problems, it doesn't even matter. So for me, when I first started, I was very science oriented. So I was like thinking science, and I look back at some of my old tapes now and I'm like, girl, who let you on TV? Like, what are you doing? Who let you on TV? Because I just was so science minded, and I wanted to prove to people that I knew what I was talking about and I knew the science. And what I realized just over the years is that, one, you don't have to prove that you know what you're talking about if you just do it with confidence. And I also had to realize that, I have degrees in this stuff. I know what I'm talking about. So now let's let down the shell, get rid of that sort of outside hardcore shell and have fun with it. But two, communicate it in a way that people are familiar, right? So all of us are impacted by weather. Like I said, if it's going to rain at 12 o'clock, I know I have to get all of my stuff done outside in the morning. And so I say that when I'm on TV, the rain is moving in this afternoon. Therefore, if you have anything to do outside, these are your dry hours. So I've learned to communicate in a way that people can understand, but also that people can take little keys or little notes, if you will, for my forecast. So say, for instance, when people watch the weather, they don't typically tune in and pay attention to every single thing. But if anything, take away that it's going to be dry in the morning. I don't need the coat tomorrow, these little things. So I think it's just important that, yes, we're communicating. And I think that's what's so special, is that we're communicating, and so unique is that we're communicating this very difficult science, and we're breaking it down into a way that people understand. Because if no one understands it, there's no point in doing this. If no one understands anything that you're saying, I could get on TV and I could say, a cold front is coming and the jet stream this and an upper level disturbance that, and you're going to look at me like, what are you talking about? I don't even know what that means. So breaking it down in a way that people can take what they need from it and apply it to their everyday life is so important. And I feel like you learn that when you do go for that communications degree or that broadcasting degree. That's where I feel like I really learned that.
Totally. And I think our Science Olympiad kids would love the big fancy terminology. They would dig that. They would pay extra for that broadcast. Someone asked, is it difficult to read off of a teleprompter? I've heard they move really fast.
Okay, so here's the interesting part. We don't use teleprompters.
Oh, wow.
Meteorologists do not use teleprompters. So with broadcast meteorologists, we really have to know what we're talking about, because everything we're saying is literally off the top of our heads. So if I am, when it comes to forecasting, I get a weather story together. That's how I start, because if you try to overthink things, one, you'll look like on TV, you'll look like you're thinking about what you're trying to say next, or you're trying to buy time. So it's best when it comes to telling a weather story that, one, you get your weather story in general, what it is that you want to communicate, and that you keep it as simple as possible. Because that way, because we're not reading a prompter, I can't, go back, or I can't, jump ahead and read ahead. I have none of that. So I'm literally going off the top of my head, and I have to keep it as simple as possible, but also keep it as short as possible so that people also can digest and follow along. But yeah, there's no prompter, but also that's why you have to know what you're talking about.
Yeah, you really do.
You have to know.
Our last question that has come through is, what advice would you give to other young women who are looking to enter a similar field in STEM and may feel like it's more of a male-dominated field? What advice would you give to them?
So I'm so glad you asked this question, because I feel like for a long time, I didn't have the confidence in myself that I have now. Because I didn't grow up seeing me on my TV screen as a broadcast meteorologist. Even when I started working in the field, I didn't work with a lot of women, and I certainly didn't work with a lot of women of color who were broadcast meteorologists. So for me, that really took a hit to my confidence, because I was like, I don't know if I can do this. What I've learned is you feel more comfortable when you see people who do look like you doing something that it is that you want to do. However, what I had to overcome in order to kind of get to this, I don't want to say this new space, but to kind of get to where I am now, is I am very confident in what I do and what I know. Like, I know that I know the weather just as good as anyone else. And I've become so sure of that now I don't care who's around me. Like, I'm just like, I don't care. You can't tell me, and no, don't get me wrong here. I do think there's a difference between learning from, because I'm fairly new to Chicago and the different weather patterns that are in the Midwest. So I am always open to being a forever student. I think you should be a forever student. You should always be willing to learn from the next person. But I do think you have to develop this confidence, knowing that you are, if you want to be a meteorologist, that you are a meteorologist and you're a good meteorologist, and that, you can move forward in your career and know that even if I don't see people around me who look like me, that I can still stand confident in what I do. And, for me, peer support, mentorship, that was huge for me, because I didn't see a lot of people who looked like me, but I had friends and I had, colleagues who, spoke amazing things into my career. And they were like, Iisha, you're going to be fine. Like, they would look at my tapes and help me along. So having that peer support and mentorship just really, really helped me a lot along this journey when I got just not quite as confident, got a little bit down, especially early in the journey.
I love that. I love that. You found your own cheerleaders.
I did.
Such an important part of the work, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We really enjoyed hearing you speak. Jenny, what do we need to know about our giveaway?
Oh, what do we need to know about our giveaway? Is that we're going to pick 2 people out of our list of registrants, and those people will get wonderful weather packs with tons of Science Olympiad and NBC Chicago swag. So very excited to send those out. So we'll announce the prize winners. You'll get an email, you'll get a follow-up, and then you'll also get the recording. We'll give you all that information as well. And I just want to say again, thank you to Iisha for just a terrific session. It was just absolutely incredible.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me and letting me do this, because again, like I said, I think weather is just one of those fields we need more, especially girls, young girls in STEM. And it's just one of those fields that I think you can have a really, really great career.
Well, this was a great session. I'm actually looking forward to rewatching it. I forgot I was working and I started learning. I was so excited that we're talking about grapple, but you gave some great advice to young people looking to pursue a career in STEM or meteorology. And you are a role model and inspiration. And we're so glad to know you and glad to have you here in Chicago. So thank you to everyone who signed on and watched, and we'll see you all soon.